All right, Maize and Blue, get to work. Time to erase 2 and 4. Talking Michigan football. We got Clayton Safety on the line from the Wolverine.com on Rivals. You know the brand, so head on over there and check out Clayton's work covering Michigan football and basketball. Clayton, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Fall camp is in full swing. I think Michigan's 4 days in now, and excited for September 4th. And we were just talking before we went live here. Week 0 is, 19 days away, so college football is super close here.
I say it all the time. It's the longest off season in sports, so it's just brutal to sit through. We've got to talk about nothing more than any other sport that you cover.
True.
But once it gets here, the games mean more than any other sport because they play the least number of them. And the guy that has the spotlight on him, of course, Clayton, is one Cade McNamara, who turned in that Rutgers comeback win from 21 down. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see him much after that. He got hurt against Penn State, but going all the way back to spring practice, Jim Harbaugh, Josh Gaddis saying a lot of good things about his development as a leader, taking control of the offense, making the right decisions, and that's carried on through here into August.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like, we've talked about Cade quite a bit, probably more than a normal quarterback, in terms of comparing that to how much he's actually played. Like you said, got hurt in his second start, or his first start, his second real game of playing. So, and that was against Penn State. But from everything that his teammates, his coaches have said, he's really taken over the offense. He's become the rock of the offense. I think Aiden Hutchinson said, kind of being that steady force. And that's something Michigan's needed out of its quarterback. Even going back to Shea Patterson, he wasn't a captain. He wasn't the leader necessarily on the offensive side of the ball or for the team in general. And that's no knock against Shea Patterson. But then Joe Milton last year, kind of the same thing. He obviously struggled on the field as well. So I think to hear that Cade McNamara has become more of a leader is huge for Michigan. And at the same time, people have said that he's taken the next step in his game as well. He's a very cerebral player. Is smart, like you said, makes those right reads, can get the ball downfield too, has a pretty big arm. He broke a ton of records playing in high school out in Nevada. So he's got some tools, and Jim Harbaugh said the other day he's got all the tools you want in a quarterback. Right now, I would put him as, it's his job to lose. I was thinking about this before we went on, about 75% chance that he's the starter in that opener, maybe even a little bit more than that. J.J. McCarthy is running number 2 right now, the highly touted freshman, and he's pushing him. And we've heard that he came out guns blazing here in fall camp after starting to pick things up over the summer. It's tough to pick up, the playbook, but he was an early enrollee. He's got his feet under him. He's going to push him. And then Alan Bowman running at 3 right now, the Texas Tech transfer. So it'll be interesting to see where all that shakes out. But right now it looks like Cade McNamara's job to lose, and they're kind of starting to rally around him, which I think is big for a Michigan team that had some clear culture issues last season.
Some of these transfers become more curious all the time, and Alan Bowman would be another one. Now, we will see how things shake out and if he's able to make up that kind of ground. But after being the guy that, other than injury, has been the starting quarterback at Texas Tech, to take that shot to go to Michigan, and then if he's got to sit on the sideline for a guy that was pretty well entrenched as a Power 5 starting quarterback, it just seems kind of like an odd move. At the time, it appeared more of a chance that he would become the starting quarterback. Clayton Safety's on the line from Rivals, the Wolverine.com, talking up Michigan football. Of course, they've been on the field for just about a week here into fall practice, probably just putting on the pads. Mm-hmm. So Clayton, I would say that if we took a poll among Michigan fans and asked, okay, who's the best offensive player on the team, we would get a lot of running backs, wide receivers, because that's where the mindset is. But those guys up front are extremely important. And Zach Zinter might be the best player on this offense.
Yeah, how about that, huh? Josh Gaddis saying that he's potentially the best player on offense. And for those that aren't too familiar, because Zach Zinter as well hasn't played a ton of football. He got to start a couple games last season because of other guys getting injured. But he's a kid who early enrolled last season, got sent home after a couple months like the rest of the students at Michigan due to the pandemic, didn't have a spring ball, comes back in the summer. This is a freak of nature when it comes to the weight room and everything like that. He came in and when we saw him in some of those snaps that he had last season, he was extremely impressive. He's kind of got that road grader type, mentality, that mean streak in him on the field. He's a nice kid off the field, but that mean streak in him when he's playing on the interior of the offensive line. And then he's just done everything right this offseason. He shed 14 pounds down to 320. So maybe some of that baby weight, if he had any of it, because he is such a strong guy. And like we said, Josh Gaddis said he might be their best offensive player. I would say at this point, I'd go with Hassan Haskins. I thought he was the most valuable player on the entire team last season. Really the only guy on offense that was consistent and that was actually, consistently productive. I guess you could put Ronnie Bell maybe in that category at wide receiver. But to hear that is huge. Zinter is, a lock to start on the offensive line, but they don't know exactly where they're going to put him. It could be guard, it could be center, depending on who else kind of stands out. So he's got some flexibility. I would think you'd want to make that decision probably in the next 10 days or so before you're, week or two heading into the first game. But right now they're, Josh Gaddis, Jim Harbaugh said that they are going to kind of see how everything shakes out and try to find the best five. But some great news that you have a guy on the interior, especially a guy this young, that you can really rely on.
Yeah, and it's just another point that makes the offensive line unique, that in other positions you would just say, okay, there's our number one corner. We just push him into the side. We know what we got there, and now we got to figure everything else out. But because of the offensive line having to work together, right, there's a guy like Zach Zinter who, okay, we got to figure out who else is good enough to be on the field and where are they going to be competent, because we know we can move him around and he's going to be really good wherever. So we got to figure out the other four and where their best positions are, because most likely he's going to be fine wherever we put him.
Right. It is interesting. And Jim Harbaugh at Big Ten Media Day was kind of taking us through the scenarios. He said, if Andrew Vastardis, who's, came back for his 6th season this year, using that extra year of eligibility, if he's fine at center, then they're going to go with Zach Zinter at right guard, which is where he played last season. Now, if they feel that he's not up to par and Zach Zinter could move over, then you insert another guy at guard, or you could move Andrew Stuber over from right tackle down to guard and insert another guy at tackle. It'd be Trente Jones or Carson Barnhart. So there's so many moving pieces with this offensive line. I thought last season was interesting because, so many guys were hurt. Jalen Mayfield, who's now on the Atlanta Falcons, was hurt for the majority of the year. Ryan Hayes was hurt for the majority of the year. Both your tackles. So to get these guys healthy and then find the best five is going to be crucial. Also, you have a first-year offensive line coach in Sharon Moore, who's moving over from tight ends coach. Played the position at Oklahoma, but it's a different beast when talking about coaching it. So I think that's another storyline to watch. Can he get these guys in the right position? Can he get them playing the right technique? It's such an important position. I've heard several college coaches say in the past that having a good offensive line coach is the most important assistant coaching job on the team. They obviously coach 5 guys that are on the field on offense, so it's huge. And I think Sharon Moore can do it. He's kind of a guy that's risen pretty quickly in the business, but until we see it, there's still going to be kind of that question mark out there.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. I don't think there's any question he is the most important assistant coach, just because there's so many variables to having 5 guys, and because they have to work together more than any other position group, and the combination, getting that right and not just saying, oh, there's the 5 best players, let's throw them out there. And I go back to something I heard from an NFL poll that was taken of personnel people and general managers when they're trying to project who is going to be good the next season. What teams are on the rise or what teams are going to falter. After looking at starting quarterbacks, they look at offensive line play and who has their offensive lines coming back that had good offensive lines. And that's the second thing they look at. Right. All right. Clayton Sayfie on the line, rivals the Wolverine.com, breaking down Michigan football for us. So here's a wild card of a certain extent. Mozzie Smith, defensive tackle, who's only played a couple of games, that this guy may hold the key to the defense's success.
Yeah, I think he might. And, this is he's up to 326. He was right around, I think, 310 maybe last season, 306 or something like that. So he's gained some more weight. and Jim Harbaugh described him as a power pack, I think was the term exactly. But Michigan has been thin on the defensive line for the last couple of years, especially on the interior. They've had some good defensive end play. Obviously, Kwity Paye was a first-round pick last year. You have a preseason first-team All-American and Aiden Hutchinson now at kind of that edge rusher spot, but they've lacked in the middle. Now they switch to a 3-4 defense, which, as we know, an odd front, a nose guard is going to be extremely crucial, even more important than it was in the past when they struggled. So Mozzie Smith has to get up to speed. All the guys are raving about him. Josh Ross, the fifth-year senior linebacker at Big Ten Media Days, was asked, who's the guy that stood out the most this offseason? He said, Mozzie Smith, Mozzie Smith, Mozzie Smith, emphatically, which I think is some high praise. Mike McDonald said the same thing. He's going to take that next step this year, and they need him to. Admittedly, Jim Harbaugh said they were looking for more size on the interior of the defensive line. That's why they went out and got Oregon State transfer Jordan Whitley, and I'm not sure how much he'll be able to contribute coming off some health issues last season. So it's important. They know it's important that Mozzie Smith, or Donovan Jeter or somebody on that interior really solidifies himself. Mozzie Smith's a guy who was highly touted out of high school. He has the talent in him, so I think he's the guy. He's probably the most ideal guy that you want to step up in that position. And, if they don't get consistent production out of that nose guard spot, the Wisconsins, the Ohio States, they're going to run the ball down Michigan's throat like we've seen it the last couple of years. So it's imperative. We talk about how important offensive line play is. If you're going to play this style of defense, so is interior defensive line play. You got to be able to plug holes, and you got to be able to kind of, get some penetration in the backfield.
Folks, we appreciate the like. Smash that like button. Please share these videos out on social media and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. We also appreciate Clayton Safey, who joins us on a regular basis to break down Michigan football. Maize and Blue, just less than 3 weeks away from action, depending on when this airs here in the next few days, coming up against Western Michigan. And Clayton, what Michigan fans are waiting to hear about during fall practice is that there are guys in the secondary that are stepping up and learning and getting better and developing. So RJ Moten at safety and DJ Turner at corner seem to be those guys.
Yeah, I would circle them as guys that are emerging in that secondary. So it was kind of no secret coming out of spring ball that Jamon Green, the fourth-year guy, will be a starting corner, most likely. There's still going to be competition there. But he's kind of solidified himself and separated himself. Vincent Gray, who started every game last season, struggled a bit at times. If you recall back in the Michigan State game, the Indiana game, early on in the season especially, he is in a battle right now with DJ Turner, third-year player from Georgia who hasn't played a whole lot in his career. He came in at one point during the Michigan State game for, I think, one series when Vince Gray had his confidence shot just a little bit with all those, jump balls that Michigan State was able to win during that game. But we haven't seen a whole lot of him. He has really emerged, and we think he's in front right now in the front runner to win that second corner job. So keep an eye on him. And then when you look at the safeties, that's a spot where Michigan is really, really talented with Dax Hill and with Brad Hawkins, but there hasn't been a ton of depth the last couple of years at that spot. But you're starting to kind of see that emerge. RJ Moten is a supreme athlete. I really liked him coming out of high school in the 2020 class. He was originally going to possibly play baseball at Michigan, so he's kind of that type of athlete. He's gotten a lot bigger. You see in some of the videos they're putting out, he's really, really built right now. So I think that he's that kind of third safety that you would bring in to play the free safety spot when you go to a nickel, and then move Dax Hill over to the nickel, because we've kind of seen them experiment a little bit with him covering some of the better receivers on the opposing roster when you go to certain matchups. So he's another name to watch in that secondary, and it's huge that Michigan's starting to get some depth developing there. And it'll be interesting to see who comes out of fall camp, because there is a lot of talent there. We get questions on our message board almost on the daily. What are you hearing about this guy? What are you hearing about that guy? It's like, well, there's some guys right now that are pretty young, but and talented, and I think have bright futures, like Darian Green Warren, for example, who was a really high 4-star a couple of years ago, but and he's at the corner spot. But I think that there are some names right now in some of the third and fourth year guys that are emerging which is something you just didn't see last season. So it's a bright spot.
As you can see down below at the on the ticker there, please join us on Patreon, and you get my predictions there, our weekly predictions. But in addition to that, Clayton's going to join us on Patreon with his predictions every week, and we've actually have rounded up about 12 or 15 media members with, and the list is growing. So I'll release that list at some point. I've released it on Patreon. We're going to have college football media commentators, analysts, writers bring us their predictions as well. So
I can't guarantee there's
right there.
I can't guarantee there's going to be many winners in those picks, but there will be picks. For me,
got to get people over to Patreon. We're going to make them a lot of money. Come on. They just have to figure out who's going to get them right.
Right. That just goes for me. I'm not speaking for anybody else. My picks, no guarantees, but I'm decent, I think.
Well, no guarantees here either. You know, that's the trick to making predictions and betting and so forth. Don't get too cocky about it. Yeah. So I will never.
Don't use the G word. Don't use the G word. No guarantees.
No, coming off a big week, I'm like, you still got to play it humble. Sometimes you can feel a little good about yourself, and when you're playing that game, the fall is coming soon. So
yep.
Talking about predictions, the AP coaches, or not the AP poll, that'll be coming out, I think, next week. But the coaches poll is a bit of a prediction, depending on how you make your approach to top 25. For some people, this is my prediction of how this season is going to end, 1 through 25. For others, they're basically saying, I believe these are the 25 best teams in the country. And some of them may have really hard schedules and others easy schedules. I'm not looking at that. I'm just telling you that those are the 25 best teams in the country. Jim Harbaugh has finished 11th, 10th, unranked in that 17 season at 8-5 after the bowl loss to South Carolina, 14-18. So say what you will about Jim Harbaugh's performance at Michigan, losing some big games, of course, but finishing ranked those 4 out of 5 seasons, and then throw out the 6-game season. I know it still counts, but it's a 6-game season in 2020. And you got to think that, especially after that first season at 10-3, finishing close to the top 10 in the country, that they've been close to a top 10 preseason pick in both the AP and the coaches poll. But this season, Clayton, no ranking in the top 25.
Yeah, that's exactly what I expected. I didn't expect them necessarily coming off of last season, and looking at what's coming back that is proven, there's not a ton of proven commodities on this team. I think there's some potential at different positions, but a ton of question marks. So it makes complete sense. It makes a little more sense than Phil Steele putting them at 60. I think they're receiving votes for the top 25. So I think they were like the 5th or 6th team in the receiving votes category for the coaches, receiving 30 votes. I don't know exactly how it works. But I think that's completely fine. I think there were some people freaking out like, oh, Coastal Carolina and Lafayette and all these teams in Louisiana are ahead of us. I saw some of that kind of panic stuff, but I've always thought, preseason, polls are kind of irrelevant. I mean, Michigan has started pretty high and finished, about 15, 16, 17 when you look at some different years. Then Jim Harbaugh's first season, I think they started off, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but somewhere maybe in the 20s or the late teens. And then they finished close to the top 10, if not in the top 10 that year. So, I mean, it really doesn't matter in my opinion. And I know, Mark, you and I have talked about, I think it was last time I was on, about how arbitrary the 25 number is when it comes to rankings and that whole system. So I don't put a ton of stock into it, but, talking to some of these Michigan players at Big Ten Media Days, just a couple weeks ago, they were saying, yeah, we know we're picked 4th in the Big Ten East in the Cleveland.com poll. And they're kind of relishing that and saying, hey, it's the first time that we've been here and haven't had these super high expectations. So let's go out and, prove people wrong. It's kind of a motivating factor for some of these guys. And of course you're going to say that, but, I kind of believe that coming off that season, they have a lot to prove. So they weren't too worried about, exactly where they're going to be ranked in this preseason poll, but it's kind of for the fans and all that. Michigan flying under the radar. So maybe, finally, will the national media give them a little bit of credit when they do finish, or if they do finish top 15 or something like that, because, they seem to base quite a bit off of, what the preseason ranking said. And if Michigan finishes at all below that preseason ranked, they're going to get some flack for it. So maybe they'll get a little bit of respect this year. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no question that the perception that is indicated in the top 25 preseason, it carries slightly into the season. But if you start 0-3, you're not going to be ranked in the top. If you start 0-2, right, unless you played the top 2 teams in the country, you're not going to be ranked in the top 25. So it all has to be decided on the field. If Michigan's 7-1 after 8 games, they're going to be ranked high, regardless of what this says currently. 5 teams in the Big Ten in the top 25. Ohio State at 4. And pretty much the top 5 teams in the country on any poll that you see are going to be the same. They're just mixed up differently. Then we've got Wisconsin at 15, Indiana 17, Iowa 18, Penn State 20. So the other 4 are slammed into the 15 to 20 range. So yeah, a lot of people out there not sure, is Penn State going to bounce back and be what they were before? They lost 5 games last year. Indiana, are they for real? Of course, Wisconsin's pretty much a mainstay between 12 and 15, it seems, every year.
Right.
And so that's where we stand. And Ohio State's got a pretty good lead as it stands based on prognostications at this point.
Pretty fair at this point for Ohio State getting that love. And yeah, like you said, the top 5 is basically shuffle the same 5 teams up and put them in there each and every year. At this point in college football. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. You look at those 5 teams from the Big Ten in the top 25, 3 of those teams from the Big Ten East, and then you add Michigan to that equation, like we said, kind of right around that 30 number. So it's going to be, I don't want to say stacked division this year, but I think it's going to be stronger than it was last season. I expect Penn State to bounce back at least a little bit. When you look at their 5 losses last year, a lot of those were single-digit games. That Indiana game was pretty controversial. So you look at that. They improved as the season went on. They won their last 4 games of the year. So that's important to know. And then, yeah, Indiana, finally they're finally the team that people are trying to catch. I guess you could say, at least coming into the year. Usually they're that team that's trying to break through. They finally did last season. So I think it's about right now. Those are the teams, when you do preseason rankings, you look at a lot of what's returning, who's proven. Indiana's got a quarterback coming back. Ohio State has talent all over the field. They've been proven each and every year. Penn State, has been a team that's kind of consistently been in that top 25, and they have a ton of talent coming back. They got a 3rd-year quarterback returning. So it makes a whole lot of sense right now when you look at the Big Ten teams in there. And then Iowa's just steady. Iowa, they'll probably finish exactly where they started at, 17 or something. So,
yeah, Indiana and Iowa actually play right out of the gate, and so does Wisconsin and Penn State week 1. Those are 2 week 1 games in the Big Ten. Those are going to be huge to get those teams off to big starts with championship aspirations. And I don't have the numbers to back me up, but I have seen certain I know I went through 50 years of polls to see how accurate or how many times does the AP in particular or the coaches poll predict the national champion before the season. And out of those 50 times, it was like 9 times.
Really?
50.
Wow.
Now, there were also about at least that many times that they had the number 2 team that then won the national championship. So it was about 18 to 20 times out of 50. I posted a video a few months ago about it. So about 18 or 20 times out of those 50 that they got the 1 or 2 team then proceeded to win the national championship. And then you could imagine the top 5 was, and especially during this playoff era, it's been easy to peg that top 3 to 4 teams
right
every year. But after that, it's a crapshoot. There's going to be at least 7 of these teams are not going to finish in the top 25.
Right. That is interesting with the top teams. But yeah, I mean, somebody usually emerges. You can usually predict, if I had to take one of 5 teams every year, I'd probably get it right almost every year, at least in this era of college football. But yeah, I agree. And you kind of mentioned this when we started talking about rankings. It's such a weird system because everyone plays a different schedule. If you are the Coastal Carolinas of the world, you're not going to play as tough of a schedule as Michigan. If they played head to head, I would probably think that, middle of the pack Big Ten team is probably right on par with like a 10-2 team from the Sun Belt. So it's just impossible to do. And that's why you kind of, in college football, as you said at the absolute top of the show, every game is so important. That's why you got to leave no doubt on the field, because, no matter what your schedule is, because, it's kind of an imperfect science that they have to determining the rankings.
And that's why at the end of the season, if you go through the top 25 rankings every year, if you're a Power 5 and you go 8-5 or 9-4, that's kind of the dividing line. If you go 9-4, you're pretty much assured you're going to finish in the top 25. If you go 8-5, you have to have a really good schedule or maybe a big bowl win to get you into the top 25. And then you're basically, regardless of the rankings or who's involved in the rankings, you're comparing those teams in the Power 5 to Group of 5 teams. And they usually have to go 12-1, 11-2 usually gets them in the top 25. And that's basically whoever kind of, it just feels right, but that's not even necessarily a good barometer. But yeah, 8-5, 9-4 is the equivalent of 11-2.
It's crazy.
It is. But people love rankings, so they're out there, and I'll have to deliver mine. I wasn't going to do a top 25 before the season, but people want them, so hey, we'll pull one together. All right, Clayton, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Thanks for having me.